Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is with great pleasure that I rise today to speak on the government's measures relating to the automotive and manufacturing sectors. Our government knows the importance of the automotive industry to Canada's economy. We know that Canadians build the best cars and trucks in the world, and we intend to keep it that way. It was just a few short years ago that the global economic downturn threatened that and challenged the North American auto industry, including Canada's, like never before. But our government took action with restructuring support for the industry. Our government's investments prevented long-term economic decline for many communities and workers across this country. Because of our support, Mr. Speaker, the automotive industry in Canada prevailed, and companies have returned to profitability and continue to build great cars and trucks in Canada. Mr. Speaker, the automotive industry is a pillar of the manufacturing sector in the Canadian economy, representing 10% of the manufacturing GDP and 13% of the total manufacturing GDP exports. 13% of total merchandise exports. I apologize. The auto sector directly employs more than 117,000 Canadians and indirectly employs about 377,000 Canadians in its supply chain, which comprises more than 730 businesses. Our government's long-term goal provides the right conditions for a sustainable and viable sector in which Canada maintains and grows its share of auto production and jobs. On January 4, 2013, when the Prime Minister announced the renewal of the Automotive Innovation Fund for $250 million over 5 years, this was a clear signal of our government's ongoing commitment to create jobs, growth, and long-term prosperity for all Canadians. In last year's budget, the government doubled down, investing an additional $500 million into the Automotive Innovation Fund. In all, the renewed Automotive Innovation Fund will provide up to $750 million over 5 years for Canadian auto sector businesses in order to support large-scale strategic projects. This support is in addition to the initial commitment of $250 million over 5 years in Budget 2008. Thanks to the Automotive Innovation Fund, innovative research and development projects are carried out here in Canada. It supports private sector investment in the auto industry and increases Canada's competitive advantage in international markets. Finally, our government's investment in the Automotive Innovation Fund supports the creation of high-quality, well-paying jobs. The Automotive Innovation Fund, however, constitutes only a part of what our government has done to support a solid automotive sector in Canada. Our government's approach also includes a fiscal and economic framework that will keep the industry competitive, including a sound banking system, the lowest overall tax rate on new business investment in the G7, the lowest debt-to-GDP ratio in the G7, and a AAA credit scoring. Our government has also supported the automotive industry through the creation of the Accelerated Capital Cost Allowance. Through this initiative, our government has provided $1.4 billion in tax relief, helping manufacturers undertake additional investment and increase productivity. And Mr. Speaker, I find it ironic today that we debate a motion where the NDP proposes to extend the Accelerated Capital Cost Allowance when just 2 years ago they voted against extending that very program. What has our government done, Mr. Speaker? We have eliminated tariffs on machinery and equipment, making Canada the first tariff-free zone for manufacturing equipment imports in the G20. We have also placed a strong emphasis on encouraging innovation and productivity through research and development, programs such as the Automotive Partnership Canada, $145 million, and Auto 21, $81.1 million in investment. Our support to the auto industry does not end there. Given the integrated nature of the industry, we have also supported the need to ensure the smooth flow of goods across the border. This includes an investment of $470 million over 2 years for the new Windsor-Detroit crossing, ensuring the continued integration of the Canadian sector with the North American supply chain. We are also working hard to ensure that Canadian automotive sector has access to world markets. Through trade agreements like the Canada-Europe Free Trade Agreement, there will be 500 million new consumers for Canadian-made cars and trucks. Our government's suite of policies, low taxes, global trade opportunities, investment policies, and a skilled labour force are working. To date, we have attracted investments in the automotive sector of $2.8 billion. Just last month, our government announced a major investment by Linamar in Guelph, Ontario. Mr. Speaker, because of our actions, Linamar is investing $507 million and expanding their operation in Canada. Linamar could have based this project in other countries, but they didn't. Linamar chose to take advantage of Canada's manufacturing landscape, our strong supply chain, low taxes, open markets, and talented workforce. This investment will create 1,200 new, well-paying, full-time jobs and will maintain an additional 1,800 jobs. Last year, the minister announced an investment of $72 million for the Ford Oakville Assembly Plant, which will transform the plant into a state-of-the-art global manufacturing facility, making it one of Ford's most sophisticated plants in the world. Today, this plant has the flexibility it needs to produce large quantities of 11 of Ford's mid-sized vehicle models, such as the redesigned Ford Edge and the Lincoln MKX, on the same platform. This plant will be one of 5 Ford plants in the world with such ability. Furthermore, this support has leveraged a $716 million investment by Ford into Canada. Mr. Speaker, our government's support for the automotive industry made for an excellent year in 2014. Last summer, Canada posted the largest trade surplus of auto exports in almost 6 years. As if that alone was not enough, in September, Canada has seen an increase of 6% in the export of motorized vehicles and auto parts, as well as an increase of 10.2% in the export of passenger vehicles. The numbers speak for themselves. In 2014, Mr. Speaker, Canadian automakers have produced more than 20 types of different vehicles and have registered unprecedented sales. Canada is a destination of choice for automakers. The country has much to offer for both automakers and parts manufacturers. And it is our government that has put in place the right conditions to allow the world-class Canadian auto sector to continue its success. Our government is serious about supporting this industry and the well-paying, highly skilled jobs it represents. We are confident that Canada's suite of policies, low taxes, global trade opportunities, investment policies, and a skilled workforce will keep Canada's auto sector among global leaders. Mr. Speaker, before I close my remarks, I want to point out that we are debating a motion by the NDP that calls on the government to build a balanced economy, support the middle class, and encourage the manufacturing sector. And while the NDP is beginning to see the light, after all of these years, it is clear that our government has taken action to create jobs and growth that supports Canadian families and businesses. Rather than the NDP's piecemeal approach, our government, and only our government, has a plan that will create jobs and growth and lead to long-term prosperity for all Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Question et commentaire. La députée de Saint-Lambert.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais tout simplement demander à mon collègue si leur bilan est, comme il le prétend, si positif que cela, pourquoi son gouvernement alors que nous savons que les petites et moyennes entreprises sont les premières créatrices d'emplois, continue de verser des milliards de dollars à des grandes entreprises qui ne créent même pas d'emplois ici au Canada.
The honourable member for Don Valley West.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleague opposite. She's absolutely correct. SMEs are the foundation of business in this country, and we currently provide the lowest tax rate in the entire G7 for business in this country that allows companies to reinvest, to prosper and profit while creating more and more additional jobs within this community. So, Mr. Speaker, I agree with her on SMEs representing some 90% of business in this country, and we are investing in those businesses to succeed and be successful in the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Okanagan-Coquihalla.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I just want to thank the member for his speech, particularly given light that the discussion today centers around a platform that the NDP have for small business. I think it just demonstrates the lack of understanding by the official opposition, Mr. Speaker, because while they talk about cutting taxes to small business, which, you know, keeping taxes low I think is the right way, that's why the government's done so much in the file, what they're also, the leader of the official opposition has also said that he wants to bring back higher corporate rates right across Canada. That will not only chase away investment in the auto sector, which is very internationally competitive, Mr. Speaker, it would also chase away all of the investments in public education. Remember, when you have these large clusters, in a certain region, it has a huge spillover effect in the kind of public education, post-secondary education. The last thing I'd mention, Mr. Speaker, if you don't have these big businesses that are operating at such a high level, that are part of their business model is to bring in small operators, through their supply chain, janitorial, supply parts, all sorts of auxiliary activity, Mr. Speaker. If you raise corporate taxes like the NDP want to do, and you chase away the sectors like the auto sector, we will actually see business dry up for these small businesses through Ontario and right across the country. Does the member agree that the NDP may say one thing in one small area of tax file, but they have big holes that they need to fill on the other end for when investment in this country gets chased away?
Honourable member for Don Valley West.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my colleague for that exceptional question and the points that he made. Clearly, he understands how conflicted the NDP truly are. And he's absolutely correct. And let me just bring to light a few other points that he didn't mention. Mr. Speaker, the NDP and the Liberals voted against support for manufacturing. I'll give you a few examples. Lowering the federal corporate income tax rate to 15%. Didn't want to do it. They voted against it. Extending the accelerated capital cost allowance for new investment in machinery and equipment. They voted against it. Automotive Innovation Fund. They voted against it. Mr. Speaker, they deal in conflict. I understand it, and I thank my colleague for his question.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Vancouver-Kingsway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I've got to correct some gross distortions of reality coming from the Conservative side. When the Conservatives talk about the official opposition voting against some of these measures, all Canadians know that it's because this Conservative government has perfected the deception of omnibus budgets, where they put into a budget bill things like obliterating environmental protection, obliterating protection for navigable rivers, changes to the Immigration Act, and they put in changes in the budget that have nothing to do with the budget, and then force the opposition to vote against that budget that does contain within it, of course, some things that we would like to support if they were properly segregated and put in a budget like they're supposed to be. So Canadians need to know that this ruse that this government is trying to pull over, the wool that they're pulling over Canadians' eyes about the NDP not supporting these things is because the Conservatives have made a mockery of the budget process through omnibus budget bills. My question is the Director of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business is supporting the New Democrats' proposal to reduce the small business tax from 11 to 10% and differentiates between global across-the-board corporate tax cuts to large corporations that don't need the money, because everybody knows that those global corporate tax cuts do not get put into the economy. That's why we have over $600 billion of idle capital in this country that's not being invested to create jobs, because this government...
We've run out of time here. We'll give the honourable member for Don Valley West 30 seconds or so to respond. Order. The honourable member for Don Valley
Mr.
West.
Speaker, and I'm not sure that I actually heard a question, but let me just say to my honourable colleague, real business investment in Canada is now 6.2% higher than it was at its peak prior to the recession. That's a fact of our economic policy and what this government has been able to accomplish. And no wonder, incidentally, that the Canadian Federation of Independent Business unequivocally supports our low tax plan. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.